point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 534th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and the amazing Invisible Man, also known as Tom Fennell.
In the flesh, but not in the studio.
Yeah, Tom's taking the easy way out, staying home. He's allowed to do that.
That's for sure.
Huh?
It is easier, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, you know, Tom has a very busy life.
Well, my car isn't working very well.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, so we're starting this out with news from the 27th of July. Tom said I should explain, we start out a week ago. Whenever we start, it's always a week ago. This time, a week ago is the 27th of July. Today is the 3rd of August, so we're doing all of the news from the 27th of July through the 2nd of August. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a certain amount of sense. All of this can be found at my blog, geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. And there's a link to that. If you're watching this on a computer, there's a link below. And if you are watching it on a computer, you can also take a link to the separate website that Tom and I use for setting up the show, and you can download the file that is used.
This particular file is long. It's the Iowa Capital Dispatch. And, you know, some of these things are well worth reading if you got the time.
Yeah. Our first item
to spare, you know.
Yeah. Our first item is from the Iowa Capital Dispatch. I'm going to put a picture up so that everybody can see what we're talking about. This is a wind farm.
I'm glad you told me.
Yeah, and this particular wind farm, I don't know where it is. I think it's in Iowa, but I'm not 100% sure. But what do you have for title, Tom?
Democrats push more resilient, lower carbon infrastructure at a U.S. Senate climate hearing.
Yeah. The changing climate is hurting infrastructure and the national economy. Members of the U.S. Senate Budget Committee said. Members of both parties agreed on a need to speed up the approval process for large energy and infrastructure projects. Now, we're going to get back to this.
That's for sure, they got to do it.
Yeah, we're going to get back to this because there's a note farther on about the amount of projects that are in the queue that are waiting for approval. These are projects that have already been applied for, and we're going to be talking about that. And it's really
the bottom line is they got to approve these things, or they ain't going to happen.
That's right, and this is not an easy process. So the quicker you get to it, the better off everybody is.
Well, for one thing, you're dealing with politics. For another thing, you're dealing with stranded assets.
Yes. Stranded assets are an important part of the whole issue.
Oh, they're real.
Yeah. I mean, if I had
20 years ago, somebody made an investment. They're still expecting that investment to pay off.
Yeah, that's true. If you made an investment 100 years ago, Tom, what would you expect it to be paying today?
A lot.
I would bet nothing, because it probably would have been destroyed in the Great Depression or something. You know, you never can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Would survive.
Yeah. Let's go on. Okay.
Can't dance.
All right. We have a picture here of a young woman charging an electric vehicle. Let me put that up so people can see it. And this is from the BBC.
That looks like a free one.
By the way, Tom, I believe that your copy of this says that this is from CNN.
It does.
But it's not. It's from the BBC. I checked it. Yeah. So go ahead with a title.
Is the decline of oil in sight?
Yeah. The idea.
Well,
What?
yes. Let me answer that very simply. Yes.
Yeah. The idea of peak oil has been around for decades. I remember talking about that when I was in college. That was over 50 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and I don't think we called it peak oil. I think we called it by another name, but it was something that we were talking about. It foresees a peak in the amount of oil we can extract and an irreversible decline in production. Yeah,
If you use it, you can't sell it again.
that's right. Last month, the International Energy Agency announced that we may soon reach a different but related value, a peak in the global use of or demand for oil.
Well, that's going to be happening too.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to anticipate the peak.
As we use more and more renewables, the demand for real oil is going to go down.
Absolutely. And we may never get to the point where there's no oil available. It may be that the demand will disappear before that point is reached.
Oh, to paraphrase Bill Clinton, it's the economic stupid.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
let's move on. We got another picture here of lithium extraction.
We do indeed. And this article is from Clean Technica.
It is that. Lithium extraction and conversion from geothermal brines.
Yeah.
10 projects that get $10.9 million from the U.S. government.
Yeah.
And just to mention parenthetically, lithium doesn't you can't mine metallic lithium from the earth.
Not metallic, no.
It's too active and it dissolves right away into something.
You know, have you ever seen lithium on a metal fall into water?
I've seen something like it. I think it was sodium that I saw, but it'll do about the same thing.
It'll do about the same thing. I had some lithium. I think
sizzles and it burns.
Yeah, it doesn't sink. It sits on the top of the water and it fizzes. And the fizz, because it fizzes very hot, the fizz catches fire. So you've got this thing of fire floating around on top of the water. It's very peculiar. Okay.
Very popular with high school science teachers.
Yeah. The synopsis on this says the U.S. DOE announced $10.9 million for 10 projects across 9 states that will advance innovative technologies to extract and convert battery-grade lithium from geothermal brine within the United States. And what that picture is, over on the left at the bottom, you see hot brine coming up from the ground.
Absolutely.
It goes into a flash tank, which means that
and it breaks into solid and gaseous.
It goes, well, I don't know if it's solid. I think it's
more liquid, I guess, than solid.
Yeah, and the gas that comes off is steam, which is used to drive a turbine to generate electricity. But in the pipe, the lithium is extracted somehow from the brine, and then the brine is re-injected into the earth.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and the extracted
lithium. On the right is all of the products of
lithium chloride, lithium carbonate, lithium hydroxide. I'm sorry, and not reading very well today. But yeah, and one of the things that I should mention is there is a lithium brine field in California, and it is by no means the only one in the United States. There's another one that is in a couple of states in the East. It's, I think, in North Carolina and possibly, it's either Virginia or South Carolina. I forget which one. It might be both because it's a big area.
In California, are you talking about the Salton Sea?
That's right.
Yeah, and there's a lot of lithium sitting around there underwater.
They say there's enough lithium under the Salton Sea to provide all the lithium the United States needs for about 100 years.
Wow.
So I don't know that that's true. I don't know how geologists figure out what's in the ground. But, there it is. Okay, we're up to Friday, July 28th. And we
got a funny-looking thing there. What are we looking at?
We're looking at a floating offshore wind turbine.
Seems to me that we visited this last week.
We did, I believe. But this is
The Gulf of Maine is too deep for these things to be directly anchored, so they're floating.
They have to float. That's right. And so the big deal with floating wind turbines is how do you get them to stay upright? And one way to do it is to have them on a framework like what you see here. This is from Maine.gov, which means it is from the government of Maine, or to put it another way, from the horse's mouth.
Governor Mills signs a bill to create jobs, advance clean energy, and fight climate change through offshore wind.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Governor Janet Mills signed into law LD 1895 to procure up to 3,000 megawatts of offshore wind energy, allowing for critical port development while protecting critical lobstering areas from development. Now, the lobster fishermen didn't want those floating wind turbines to get in the way of their fishing.
Is that right? Because it's actually helping their fishing.
Well, I think these things are going to be parked farther out to sea than lobster fishermen do their work. I don't think there's any.
Well, we're talking about the Gulf of Maine, actually.
Yeah, we are. And the lobsters, as I understand it, are mostly pretty close to land, but I could be wrong.
Well, we're talking about 3 gigawatts there.
And what's a gigawatt?
Gigawatts, baby.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to be coming up with gigawatts again in this show. Should we go on, Tom?
Watts, huh?
What's that?
I said gigawatts is bigawatts.
That's right. I think you said that before.
I'm going to say it again, too.
Okay. Well, I expect you probably will. We have a picture here of 1 Java Street. And this is in Brooklyn. Did you know where Java Street was?
No, I didn't, and I worked there, and I did.
Java Street is, what's the northernmost neighborhood of Brooklyn?
Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Williamsburg.
No, this is actually north of Williamsburg.
I can't think of it.
I can't think of it either. I would have answered Williamsburg, but this is north. This is facing. This is in an area facing Manhattan from the east, not the south.
That's a big building.
That is a big building. That's right. And this is from CNN. What do you have for the title?
Air conditioning is hard on the planet. This building has a sustainable solution.
This is amazing to me. With 834 rental apartments along with commercial space, this is not a small building. A building on Brooklyn's waterfront is set to be the largest multifamily residential building with geothermal heating and cooling in New York State when it's completed in late 2025. Now, it may be the latest in the United States, the largest in the United States, but this is according to developer Lend Lease. And that picture on that right-hand part of the picture with a grate underground, that's what their geothermal system is going to look like, and it goes way underground. I think it's more than 5.
Who thought that there was geothermal underneath Manhattan?
They're just going they're going really deep into the ground with a lot of stuff, Tom. I don't think there's hot earth there. I think they're just tapping the latent temperature of the earth. They're going for.
What it's worth, those 2 pictures are the same building.
That's right. They're going for a part of the ground that is something in excess of 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And what they're doing is they're extracting heat out of that. So they never have to worry about extracting heat from the air outside, which can, in fact, go to below zero.
They're pulling it out of the ground. It's like it's free.
That's right. The heat is free. All they got to do is concentrate it with a heat pump, and then go on. Okay, I think we should go on, if you don't mind. I have this next piece that comes up is from the BBC, and we have a picture of an Italian weather station, and I've got something to say about this one.
Okay.
What do you got for a title?
False claims of bogus heat waves spread online.
Right. False claims suggesting that the BBC misreported temperatures in Southern Europe were spread on social media. One GB News presenter accused the BBC of trying to, quote, make people terrified of the weather, end quote, by reporting ground temperatures instead of air temperatures. This accusation was debunked. Now, what I want to tell you is, a friend of mine came to me and said, what is this all about? These people are saying that the ground temperatures are being reported instead of the air temperatures. Now, the ground temperature that was being reported was a temperature in Sicily, also in Sardinia, both of which are parts of Italy. They're islands, but they're parts of Italy. And the temperature that was reported was 47 degrees Celsius, which is about 118 degrees, which was
warm.
Yeah, it's kind of warm, record-breaking. And the person who was saying that this was untrue was saying the actual temperature was not 47, it was 37. And I looked
hot.
Huh?
Still hot.
Still hot, it's 100 degrees. But there's a big difference between 100 and 117 or 118. And I looked at that and I said, no, that can't be. How would they do that? So I started looking into it, and I found that, in fact, there were probably several thousand weather stations. We have 8,000 weather stations in the United States, and they're all kind of combined together, you know, to find out what the weather is over the country. I think we might have enough weather stations in the United States that we don't even need satellites anymore. But they're tied together on the internet, and, you know, the weather can be taken from them. It's a lot better weather when you have the satellites involved.
Is that a weather station in West Brattleboro?
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But the person was saying the satellite was measuring the temperature of the ground, and somehow the weather people were using that instead of the normal ground temperatures that were being used. And I said, no, I don't think so. Because you'd have to pull the eyes over not only, you know, the people who in the weather station doing the reporting, but the people in a whole bunch of other weather stations too. And so I was doing all of this stuff, and then the next day I got up, did my blog, found this story in the BBC. I was really disappointed by this story because it made it sound like it was just the BBC being accused, but it wasn't. Just the BBC. And in fact, the person who wrote about the BBC said that the BBC had said there was a 47 degree temperature in, the BBC reported 47 degrees in Sicily. But you know this isn't true because the temperature in Palermo was only 37. Well, Palermo happened to be the coldest place in Sicily that day at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And this was a typical kind of piecework of misinformation that was reported all over the news. It was
like deliberate misinformation.
It was deliberate misinformation. Yeah, I have no doubt about it. But I mean, I don't have a doubt. Maybe it wasn't deliberate misinformation. Maybe the guy just fooled himself. But there was more than one person involved. There was more than one report involved. And it turns out that what was reported was, in fact, the highest temperatures ever reported in Europe. And the people who have been denying climate change and are still denying climate change had to come up with some way of dealing with that. And the way they dealt with it was by saying that the people who reported it were lying. So, you know, that's what you do. If you don't like the news, make it a lie.
Make up your own.
Yeah, make up your own. That's right. So, should we go on?
Yeah, we got a nice picture of installing the substation.
Yeah, and this is something that blew me away. We're up to Saturday, July 29th, by the way, and this is from Electrek, Electrek. It's a kind of a electric Star Trek or something. I don't know. So what do you have for a title?
The first U.S. utility-scale offshore wind farm just got the first U.S.-built offshore substation.
Yeah.
Well, that's appropriate.
Well, just look at that picture. I hadn't got it up for viewers yet. That picture shows the substation, which, by the way, is dangling on a few wires from a crane that happens to be on a ship out at sea. And that substation weighs 6,000 pounds. I mean tons, rather. Let me read what it says.
We're going to sit it on that pedestal.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it's 60 feet tall and it weighs 1,500 tons. I don't know where my mind is. The first U.S. built... what?
You said 1,500 tons?
1,500 tons.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. The first U.S. built offshore substation is now standing at New York South Fork the first utility-scale offshore wind farm. Tom, is there an offshore wind farm that is not utility scale?
That I'm aware of.
First one in United States federal waters. South Fork's wind's 1,500 ton, 60-foot tall offshore substation came from Texas to New York by ship. And then it was offloaded.
They weren't going to drive it on a highway.
What?
They weren't going to drive it on a highway.
No, they were not going to move that on a highway. It's interesting to look at that and think about the fact that thing dangled. It's pretty big. That thing dangling from it on the right side, underneath it, has a set of stairs. And that's more than, just one staircase worth of stairs. That thing's 6 stories tall, and then some.
Yeah, that's a set of stairs, isn't it? Yeah, I was thinking it looked like a ladder, but slanting is a stairway.
That's right. This thing is unbelievably big, Yeah, it is. If you parked that in the co-op parking lot, nobody'd get in and out for years.
If you parked it anywhere in Brattleboro, nobody'd get in or out.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, should we go on?
Can't dance.
Okay.
I'll mention, though, that the South Fork is a peninsula on the south shore of Long Island, New York.
Yes.
And it for reference, it includes the Hamptons.
Now, yes. Now, here is a picture of wind turbines, and this article is from Idaho Capital Sun, and this is the reason I was talking about gigawatts when we started out earlier. What do you have for a title?
Federal regulators approve new rules to ease backlogs. Well,
right.
that goes along with what we've already told them.
Yeah, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which people call FERC, finalized long-awaited new rules intended to reform how power generation projects get connected to the electric grid. FERC Chairman Willie Phillips said there are 2,000 gigawatts of power projects stuck in the interconnection queue.
That's 2,000 gigawatts.
2,000 gigawatts.
What is that, terawatts?
That's a terawatt.
Yeah.
And I want to point out here, you could say 2,000 gigawatts is 2,000 bigawatts. Okay, I went and looked up to find out how much capacity is online in the United States right now.
Good point.
Yeah.
How much?
How much? 1,115 and a little over. So the amount that's stuck
double it.
The amount that's stuck in the queue is more than the amount that we have running.
Civil serpents.
Yeah, and some of that's stuck in the queue is natural gas, but most of it is renewable. And none of it, by the way, is coal. And as a matter of fact, I think none of it is, I don't think any of it is nuclear, as a matter of fact. There is a nuclear reactor that's still under development in Georgia. The Vogtle 3 is now in production. Vogtle 4 is still moving toward that point, and it'll be months before they get there, but they have started loading fuel. So after that, I don't think there's anything left in the nuclear queue at all. I might be wrong.
The not too distant future, fuel is going to be a fossil.
I think you're right, and I think that includes nuclear fuel.
I think it does.
Yeah, because nuclear power is too expensive, and you know that presentation that NextEra Energy gave to their stockholders last October is a really good explanation of that. They talk about what's called near-firm solar and near-firm wind, and they compare it with nuclear. And they say near-firm solar and near-firm wind are both backed up by enough batteries that they are going to be approximately as reliable for producing dispatchable energy in peak demand periods as nuclear is. And
they're cheap.
And they are both about 4 cents per kilowatt hour or less, where the cheapest from nuclear is 10.5.
That's cheap. That's cheap to me.
Yeah, and so nuclear, and this includes the expected prices that they're talking about for small modular reactors. This is NextEra Energy. It is by some metrics the biggest utility in the United States. They own 7 nuclear reactors, including the one at Seabrook, and they are just saying, okay, here's the explanation in case you people want to know. This is the reason why we're not going to build any nuclear reactors, and we're not going to build anything with natural gas either. Everything is going to be near-firm solar and near-firm wind. That's why. They've got this projected for 10 years out. And another thing, Tom, we have to substantially deal with climate change within the next 10 years. And it's going to take 10 years to get the first nuclear reactors online in any number. And we don't have the time that it takes to do that. And we don't have the money that it takes to do that when you consider that we can get solar and wind installed for 1/3 of the price, 3 times as fast. So now you know why I'm not interested.
Economic stupid.
Yep, that's right. Okay, we have a picture of Portland. You ever been to Portland?
I have.
Yeah, Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine?
Been to Portland, Oregon. Been to Portland, Maine.
That is Portland, Maine, and I've been there.
Gotta be.
But those boats weren't there when I was there. It was different boats.
Different boats. Oh, okay.
Different boats. I had a roommate when I was in college who lived on Peaks Island, which has a rather small population. Okay, this is from Clean Technica, and you have a title.
Heat pumps and floating wind to lead zero emissions campaign in Maine.
That's right. Now, we've talked about the offshore wind turbines previously in this broadcast and in earlier broadcasts. When the people of Maine realized how much money they could save every winter by switching to heat pumps, they began installing them in record numbers. In fact, Maine blew by a target of 100,000 heat pumps by 2025, 2 years ahead of schedule.
It's the economic stupid.
I guess it is. Should we go on?
Can't dance.
Okay. This
We
next...
got Sunday, July 30th coming right up.
We do. Thank you for that. I was going to forget. This is from Clean Technica, and this is a little bit frightening, but I will tell you, the graph has been updated since this graph was made, and that red line is on a strong downward slant right now. But nevertheless, it is something that I find scary.
The red line looked like it was just hitting a peak. It's just starting to turn down.
That's right, and it has turned down quite a lot more. But I don't know what to make of this. The current sea temperatures are way out of line with anything that has ever been measured before. We have dates there going back to the 70s, And, it's like daily surface temperatures back to the 1970s. And you can see this year it's an outlier by a wide margin. Okay, so what do you have for title?
July 2023. That's now.
Well, that's last month.
That's yesterday, a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
That could be the hottest month on record.
Yeah. According to data released today, and today, by the way, was, I think, July 29th. Maybe it was July 28th. I try to take the word today out of these synopses, so because it's confusing what it's meant. Okay, according to data released today, whenever today is, has already seen the hottest 3-day period ever recorded.
Ever recorded.
The three hottest days on record, and the highest ever ocean temperatures for this time of year. And this is something.
Bingo.
Yeah. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told this to journalists at the UN headquarters in New York. He is not happy about climate change.
No, not at all. He's been talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. Should we go on, Tom?
Moving right along.
Moving right along. Whoops. We have a picture of a couple on a beach.
It says vacation, and it comes from the photo Maldives of the photo. Comes from the photos of the Maldives, which are islands.
Yes, and this is from CNN. So, what do you have for a title?
I just pass it up. Vacations, as we know it, are over. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, right. Terrified tourists on holidays in Greek islands this week came face to face with the future. The widespread and extreme weather conditions across southern Europe this summer are a wake-up call. And by the way, the thing about the Greek islands was the islands, people who were vacationing on the islands had to evacuate because of wildfires. This is a reminder that not even our vacations are insulated from the growing consequences of global heating.
Oh, it's not wildfires, it's rising water levels.
It's all kinds of stuff. And I'm thinking of what was it, 2.5 months ago, almost 3 months ago, I had an operation on my heart. In fact, I had 3 operations on my heart. And I will tell you, I was awake through all 3 of them.
Were you really?
I was. They put in a new heart valve, and they put in a pacemaker, and then they had to reattach the pacemaker because it had become detached. And I was awake through all of that. But while that happened, I met a lot of people. And I was up at Dartmouth Hitchcock in Lebanon, and I have not yet met anybody at Dartmouth Hitchcock I didn't like. But there was a nurse there who was...
Good job up there.
Huh?
He's doing a good job up there.
They're excellent. I want to tell you something about Dartmouth Hitchcock in Lebanon. Their coffee tastes like coffee. Got that?
Amazing.
Anyway, there was a nurse up there who was delightful. She was just a delightful human being. And, she was kind and she was intelligent. I think she was obviously competent. And she told me that she was going to a wedding in Italy. And the women who were, in the bridal group, decided that they were going to have a party for the bride. And so, for whatever reason, they flew to Cancun for the party.
Huh?
Yeah. And I heard this and I thought, they've got the money to do this. They've got enough money to do this. And they apparently don't mind. Maybe they hold the bride in high enough esteem that they're willing to part with a fair amount of money to fly from Italy to Cancun and back. But that's a lot of fossil fuel that's going to be used to move them back and forth.
True.
And just having the wedding in Italy because neither the bride nor the groom, nor I think probably a large number of the guests, I might be getting that wrong. It might be one of them is Italian, but my recollection was that nobody was Italian. They were just doing.
From Italy.
They were just going to Italy because it was a special wedding, and they were giving the couple getting married a wonderful time. But there's a tone of entitlement in that, and it makes me think if they had thought about this, I think they would have found a place closer to home.
From the article, it says, not even our vacations are insulated from the growing consequences of global heating.
That's right, yeah.
Not global warming, it's global heating.
Global heating now, yeah, okay. Let's go ahead, okay?
Can't dance.
Okay, this is one of the best pictures I've seen.
Can't dance, can't scroll either. Come on, here we go.
Yeah, this is one of the best pictures of Antarctica I've seen.
It looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But you know, those are rugged mountains. Okay, this is from CNN.
Antarctica is missing an Argentina-sized amount of sea ice, and scientists are scrambling to figure out why.
Yeah, much of the northern hemisphere is suffering from record-breaking summer heat waves, but in Antarctic winter, another terrifying climate record is being broken. The sea ice is 1.6 million square miles, which is 0.6, square kilometers, which is 0.6 million square miles below the record low, which was set last year.
So the winter down there is warmer.
The winter is warmer, that's right. And the total amount of ice that is missing from what was last year, when they set a record, is about the size of Argentina or Mexico. So that's a lot of ice that's missing, and it's missing from, the edges of the continent. But it's not a single block of ice that floated off.
It's the cumulative total.
Yeah, and it makes me, I just think the penguins were having a terrible time down there because their paths to and from their nesting grounds, which are on glaciers or blocks of ice way away from the coast, they nest very far from the coast, miles from the coast, because they don't want to be in places where the predatory birds will come.
Uh-huh.
And they were just having a terrible time finding places to nest because the situation had changed so much. Okay, we are up to Monday, July 31st, and we should put up a picture of what is in effect a storage battery.
I was just going to say that's a couple of batteries what we're looking at.
Yep, energy storage. This is from CETT, which is actually a company in the magazine. This is from PV Magazine Australia.
Well, it's the Clean Energy Transfer Fund.
Yeah, that's right. CETF. I'm sorry.
It's from Queensland.
Yeah. So what do you got for a title?
CETF counters long lead times with 200 megawatt hour battery hives. They call them hives.
They call them hives. Clean Energy Transfer Fund, based in Queensland, plans to get around the long lead times for renewable energy and major capital outlays of grid-scale renewable projects by using hundreds of sub-5 megawatt battery units across Australia to create coordinated battery hives of up to 200 megawatt hours each. And I don't know what the tech...
A lot of these things all over the place instead of one great big one.
That's right. They want them all over the place. And these batteries, I was amazed. I looked at a battery system that they were talking about building a transmission project that was 100 miles long to transmit power from a renewable site to a city. And the people who were doing this decided that instead of spending a lot of money to get the power from the site, which was a solar site, they would instead spend half the money on a battery and the other half on the transmission lines. And the point that they made was, because it was solar, you're only generating power half the day.
Yeah.
And if you generate the power and put it into a battery, you can transmit that power 24/7.
Yeah, right.
And if you do that, you're transmitting at 2 o'clock in the morning when you wouldn't if it was solar. And that means that you can transmit at a lower voltage or a smaller amount of electricity at any given time. So the transmission lines can be very much smaller, which saves you a lot of copper.
Yeah, right.
So, go on.
Yes.
Okay, we have a picture here of Sherburne County Generating Station. This is from Energy News Network.
Northland transmission line to boost reliability as power plants are replaced by renewables.
Yes. Large cross-country transmission lines carrying clean energy from remote rural areas to population centers will be a key strategy for cutting emissions. The 180-mile-long Northland Reliability Project has a budget of $970 million.
By the way, that Sherburne is in Minnesota.
Yeah. Thank you for telling me. I don't have it in my notes. But there you have it. And that means that you can, they can close down plants like what you were looking at, which is the generating station. Okay.
With the big smokestacks.
Yes, that's right. And now we have firefighters from the BC government, BC, of course, being British Columbia. And this is from the BBC, which is the British Broadcast Company Corporation.
Canada wildfire. Firefighter dies tackling British Columbia blaze.
Yeah. A third firefighter has died battling Canada's worst wildfire season on record. So far this season, Canadian wildfires have burned about 30 million acres, more than the land area of North Korea or Cuba. Out of 990 fires in Canada, 613 are considered to be out of control.
That's 60%.
Well, some of these are out of control, and they're not going to. They have already said they're not going to bother trying to control them because there's no human population. It's almost impossible to get to them, and some of those fires in Canada, and this has historically been the case. They've had fires that just burn all summer and go out when the snow hits them.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, should we go on?
Yes.
Okay. These are idle oil rigs. I'm going to put this up for everybody.
Yeah, there's nobody working there.
Yeah, these are almost
vacation.
Yeah, these are almost like barges with all this stuff, and they tow them to where they need them, and then they put them up on those jacking rigs that are on top of them. I don't know how tall those are, but I'd bet that those jacks go up 20, 25 stories in the air.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. Okay, what do you have for title?
The UK will drill for more oil and gas in the North Sea. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense if you believe that you need oil and gas. Okay.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the UK government announces plans to allow big expansion of drilling for oil and gas in the North Sea in a move that green activists describe as taking a wrecking ball to the UK climate commitments. The Prime Minister also announced plans for 2 carbon capture and storage sites in the North Sea. Now, Rishi Sunak, who is the Prime Minister, has 2 daughters who are, I didn't put that picture up so people could see it. He has 2 daughters who are really into dealing with climate change, and they're both furious with them. That's what I've been told.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they're talking about carbon capture and storage sites.
Yeah, and that's, a sop that's thrown to the fossil fuel industry to give them a chance to keep going. And honestly, I don't think there's any hope in this actually getting anywhere. And
I think it's fixed.
yeah. Okay, we are back home with a picture of flooded Montpelier.
It's really flooded too. Look at Montpelier. Now on the left is a river, but the rest of it's in town, and it looks like it's all underwater.
Yeah, the Capitol building there is, which you can see kind of a little bit to the right of the middle.
Right in the middle.
And about 3/4 of the way up from the bottom. You can see its gold dome. By the way, that is gold.
Is it gold? Huh?
It is gold, but it doesn't have anywhere near the amount of gold you might think, because it's gold leaf, which is so thin that if you touch it with your hands, it'll just disappear.
I knew who was on top, but I forgot.
Yeah, I don't remember either. Anyway, this is from BBC, believe it or not, and there's been a lot of news from around the world about what hit Vermont, the flooding that hit Vermont. So what do you have for a title?
Well, it hit Vermont pretty hard, but we avoided it entirely.
Well, here in Brattleboro, yeah, basically, we had a kind of a typical heavy rain rise in the Whetstone Brook, and it's, so what? So a tree broke loose on the bank and floated down, went over the dam, whatever.
How? The U.S. is fighting back against deadly floods.
Yeah, in the early days, the state of Vermont was hit by in early July, the state of Vermont was hit by historic flooding. Over 9 inches of rain fell in some areas in a single day.
That's a lot of rain.
That's a lot of rain. And climate change is projected to bring more such precipitation. Restoring key floodplains in Vermont could reduce flood-related damages by 20%, according to a study that was published in 2022, before all of this flooding. And
we never expected to see that kind of flooding here.
No, we didn't. But
we should have. I lost a car in a flood back in
Irene.
10 years ago. Irene, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have more of this. This is what's happening all over the United States. 100-year floods are coming more and more regularly.
So. They have to rename them as 10-year floods, aren't they?
Something like that, yeah. I mean, Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, and there were neighborhoods that were completely flooded that were not even in a flood zone. So how do you account for that? Okay, we have a picture of a geothermal power plant in Iceland. You ever?
Good place for it.
What's that?
Good place for it. They got a lot of potential.
Oh, they do. Okay, and this is from Clean Technica. And what do you have for a title?
The NREL, which is the National Renewable Energy Lab.
Yep. Researchers
bring technical expertise to communities selected for geothermal heating and cooling initiative.
Right. NREL, as you said, the National Renewable Energy Lab, will assist communities in Colorado, Carbondale being an example, in Vermont, the example is Middlebury, and Alaska, and there are 2 communities there. One is Seward, and the other is a place not far from Seward called Pilgrim Hot Springs. Not far from Nome, to install district and networked geothermal technologies. Now, they're talking about geothermal technologies being installed in Vermont, in Middlebury, Vermont.
Well, we've got geothermal right here in Brattleboro up by the high school.
That's geothermal heating. I think this is geothermal. That's heating and cooling. I'm sorry. You're right.
It's a small unit, but there's an apartment house there that's at least partially heated.
Yeah. And there's a company that will install geothermal in New York State, in at least parts of New York State, for no money down. And they will own the system, and you pay for a predetermined amount for the heat over the period. And
it makes it more affordable, doesn't it?
After 10 years, they sell you the system. You might need new equipment, but the expensive thing in geothermal is the well, and you get that well.
Uh-huh.
And the well's going to be good for 50 years. Okay, we're up to Wednesday, August 2nd, and an article from CNN. And
is that an offshore oil rig?
that looks like an offshore oil rig, don't it?
It certainly does.
Yep.
The UK once vowed to be a global climate leader. Now the Prime Minister is stoking a culture war on green policies.
Well,
wow.
this updates what we said just a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
Less than 2 years ago, Britain was making itself a global leader in the fight against the climate crisis. Now, as the Sunak government limps toward an election many expect it to lose, determination seems to have been swapped for divisiveness. And the divisiveness is the divisiveness of taking stands that are going to get it monies for election campaigns, but not the stands that people want, or at least a lot of people want, including...
Well, Sunak is the Prime Minister, by the way.
That's right. And he's got, as I said earlier, 2 daughters who are not exactly pleased. He has to live with being Prime Minister. They have to live the rest of their lives.
Point there.
Yeah. Okay, should we go on?
I'm talking to this thing. It won't scroll, but it just did it.
Okay. I'm going to the new picture, which is a picture of power lines. And I don't...
Electric lines kill
Boyds.
but they're a lot better than climate change.
Yeah, this was an interesting article. The National Audubon Society published a report that makes the case for displacing fossil fuels by building a lot more renewable energy infrastructure, even if certain birds are killed or harmed by some of that infrastructure. Now, what they're talking about here, well, the report focuses on power lines specifically. Power lines, if you think about this, it makes sense. Power lines are more dangerous to birds. And I'm not talking about running through the neighborhood. I'm talking about the big power lines. They're more dangerous to birds than wind turbines are. The wind turbines, you got that thing going round and round, and it looks very scary, but very few birds fly that high. And anyway, this is from the Los Angeles Times.
You never hear much about tall buildings killing birds.
They're unbelievable, unbelievable. I spent about 2 hours trying to find out, how do they know how many birds get killed? And I finally found a paper that had been published in a peer-reviewed journal that described how they find out. And it described how they did an inventory of dead birds at a power generating site. And they had people going around, and every time they found the body of a dead bird, this was done during migration season, so they'd have a lot of birds in a very short time. That way they don't have to pay everybody for being there all year. And these people while they were there, found 1,700 dead birds that they could identify. And they estimated based on, they'd come across a pile of feathers. Somebody ate the bird. Who killed it? How do you know? They would cite a seagull flying away with the body of a dead sparrow that it was planning to eat, or a fox running off with the body of a dead duck. How did the bird die? They don't know. They estimated that there were approximately twice as many birds that were killed by collisions at that site as there were that they could identify as being killed. That is twice as many in addition. So
we don't talk much about how many birds are killed by tall buildings.
Well, let me get back to that. Anyway, they estimated 5,100 birds in the inventory period. That was an inventory period of 48 hours. These birds were dying at a rate of much faster than one every minute.
Wow.
And I got to tell you, tall buildings, well, there were 6 generators at that site, 1 nuclear and 5 coal. The birds were running into cooling towers.
Yeah.
And the reason that happened is because the birds were migrating by moonlight and they didn't see the cooling towers. Why would you expect a cooling tower to be there when you're flying 100 feet above the forest? Why would you crash into anything?
Shouldn't be anything there.
Yeah. You say that, know that, and I know that, and the birds know that, and the people who run the power generating plant don't know that. But these birds were being killed by the same kind of thermal power plants that we've had around forever, or through my whole life and your whole life and before that. Yeah, tall buildings are a big problem. Okay.
Well, New York City, it's common to go out early in the morning with the superintendent of the building to pick up the birds.
Yeah, it's sad. Okay, we're to our last article, which is from the BBC. That the previous article, by the way, just in case I did read it. It's from the Los Angeles Times. This is a picture of Phoenix. And what do you have for title?
Phoenix gets some relief from heat streak of 31 days over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. 31 days straight over 110 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Wow.
But what relief did they get? Listen, residents of Phoenix have received a brief respite as a 31-day streak of temperatures over 110 came to an end after monsoon rains. The heat streak ended on Monday when the temperature maxed out at 108. So their respite was getting down to 108.
Wow.
And by the way, temperatures are expected
This
to
isn't
rise.
over, by the way.
What?
This isn't over yet.
Oh no, temperatures are expected to rise again this week, possibly to 115.
Oof.
Yeah, woof. That's right. You got it, Tom. Oof. Okay, we are at the end of our program.
That was an interesting show. We had some pretty good articles.
Yeah, let me put this last slide up. It says to everybody, have a beautifully agreeable week. So I'm waving goodbye, and Tom is waving goodbye, and he has a message for everybody.
You'll come back now and see us, you hear?
Tom, is your cat waving its tail?
No, he's sitting right here, and he's looking at the television, but he's not...
He's not moved. Maybe our show didn't interest him much.